specific entry point you want to start with?
Yeah, actually, I mean, okay, so um I'm if we want to start with energy and f the feeling of energy, like last night being at this Irish wedding, I was able to be in the moment, connect with people, with friends, and then also using the skills from years of training, able to sit back and observe the energy, you know. And I know a lot of people can do that, but observing it from the point of what is the purpose of this gathering with people?
Mm,
And for me, as the years have gone on, I have a specific feeling that comes over me visually, sensory, and that I know that I'm going into that zone. I suppose fighter pilots call it the flow state. You know, this is quite a common thing, and it's just a joy to be able to do that in the moment. And I think that's partly I put that down to a lot of my training. Um, One of the things that I'm really, really enjoying is the growth of Qigong as a tool. It's growing very nicely here in Ireland. Um,
that's great to hear, bro.
yeah. I tell you how amazing it was. So a week or so ago, we were doing a tribal rite of passage for my son. And we visited a place called Drombeg Circle. You can Google it, Drombeg, Drombeg. It's a small, humble stone circle, but probably one of the most important
Ooh.
findings. And we did a ceremony with my son, watching the sun come up, pass onto the stone circle, watching the moon settle. And that same morning, we went down to the beach and he was put through his paces by a friend of mine who trained in Shaolin Kung Fu. So my son was put through it. And out of the blue, I was talking to another colleague of mine, and this lady walked onto the beach. And this is something I would never have seen living here 30 years ago. She just stood by the waves and started doing turning, Qigong style turning. So turning her waist left and right, letting the arms flow sweet, flow. And a friend of mine who I train in Qigong, he turned and he looked at me and he went, "That's pretty nice to see, isn't it?" And I said, "What are the chances?" You know, that's how much Qigong has grown in Ireland. Normally, people would go onto the beach, maybe dip in the water, maybe, I don't know, throw a ball for a dog, or, maybe do some yoga even. But then to see people ground themselves, get into the ground and start turning. So it's just wonderful to see that that's kind of becoming the normal, you know. And of course, then you see my son coming down onto the beach, doing his Shaolin deep stances and, doing push-ups and running and punching and doing a type of hard Qigong training. He's only 17. So to me, it's amazing. It's taken like 30 years of living here to see that just become normal. Um, a friend of mine in Dublin has now, I think, 30 or 40 people that come to him every week to do Qigong out of just suddenly exploded, you know.
Wow.
Um, Now we're nowhere near the numbers for yoga or Pilates, but I think Qigong's going to take a little while longer, just a little while longer,
Yep.
partly because of the way it's been transmitted.
Yep. I agree.
So yoga would have been transmitted predominantly, as you know, by bilingual people to the Western culture, and it just, I suppose, the Western culture ran with it, and it was made popular through, I suppose, changing circumstances, changing in the way people were living their lives, how they were eating, how they were sleeping. And when people ask me what is the difference, what I've learned, and I'm not saying this is the truth, I'm saying this is the truth for me, is yoga is a discipline that helps you become ready to master then spirituality. So being able to sit in silence for a long period of time, being able to be fit and strong enough to sit in meditation for long periods of time. And the act of doing yoga or communing with that energy of unity is just the preparation, is the groundwork, is the foundations for ultimately meditation and then, going into those other realms. I find for me at the moment, Qigong is offering a gateway to health through awareness of self and energy outside of the body and energy then ultimately inside the body. So the word Qigong, as you know, is relatively modern. It's a word that's not, it's a very umbrella term. It's like saying yoga, right? Yoga
Hmm.
covers
Hmm.
so many
Hmm.
meanings, so many branches. So I know we've had this conversation before, but the clarity over, we use Qigong as a generic term, okay? So it's like saying, for example, China Universe Qigong, or maybe we're doing a type of stretching, opening the joints of the body. Quite a famous set of exercises called Ba Duan Jin, and this is 8 pieces of brocade, very, very famous in the Qigong circles. And that's a form of Qigong, but really it's not really a Qigong, it's just we put it in that category. And I think using that word has helped spread it.
Hmm.
Is it the same as Tai Chi? I don't think so. I mean, you could argue that Tai Chi Chuan is a form of movement, moving Qigong, but actually Tai Chi Chuan was a martial art. It was primarily a martial art, and those that achieve a very, very great depth in it will tell you that it becomes a vehicle for spirituality
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
that depth of awareness in the body helps you ascend. Um, for me at the moment, I'm concentrating on Neigong again. So Neigong, to differentiate for the listeners, chi, energy, prana, right? Mana, whatever you want to call it, life force energy, mastery. That's what Qigong means is, but the Gong section carries a lot more meaning. It means skill, effort, mastery, which is a combination of practice, effort, and consistency over time. That gives you the Gong. So Gong Fu, the word Gong Fu is actually means great skill. It doesn't mean martial arts or fighting. It's just something that we've adopted in the West. Neigong means nei is like internal cultivation. It's from neidan, which means internal work. And then Gong is internal skill. So you'll see Neigong in a lot of things, um, not just in breath work, movement, stance work. It also is applied in the martial realms for some people to be able to defend themselves using a power that we would probably liken to using fascia rather than using muscular power, so
Hmm.
using the body as one unit, as an example. Um, Fortunate enough to be delving into that a lot more. And then more recently, learning a style of martial art called Wuji Chuan. Wuji is supreme or emptiness, primordial emptiness. It's a state that you can go from zero in any direction. And I suppose the Quan bit or the Chuan bit is this idea of it has an element of martial meaning to it. So it can mean fist, but it's a lot more than that. And that's an interesting system,
Hmm.
very, very flowing, very
Hmm.
soft. I think people, when they see me do it, they mistake it for Tai Chi,
Hmm.
but it's a very, very different animal.
Hmm.
And it's spiritual. I call it spiritual Kung Fu. It's a very strange for me, a very unusual feeling to it.
Hmm.
And it's based on sacred geometry that exists internally and externally from the body. And it's connecting that geometry, those shapes within the body. And those
Hmm.
shapes have spiritual significance to energy cultivation.
Hmm.
And that all sounds a lot of woo-woo until you actually experience being thrown or pushed or punched from its power, and you're like, huh,
Hmm.
that's different.
Hmm.
Um, and then for me, then this year, I've been writing a children's book about Neigong. We're nearly, I just had the first 8 illustrations finished by actually a client of mine, a young client. So,
Hmm.
and it's the story of a monkey and an eagle interacting together.
Hmm.
And the monkey is the student and the eagle is the teacher. And if you remember the 8 step Neigong that I showed you nearly, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe 7 years ago, in Tofino, that has it's the story of the development of that style
Hmm.
of Neigong, which
Wow.
is predominantly stance work,
Yep.
but each stance is a sacred shape
Hmm.
and allows you to connect with a different energy within the body.
Hmm.
Um, in terms of clinical work, I've been teaching Qigong, Neigong to patients to help them recover quicker because exercise rehab is phenomenal, but sometimes they're in a position where they can't commit to doing a certain level of physicality because the injury is maybe so severe, or maybe it needs something outside of doing functional movements. So the Qigong, Neigong exercises and movement helps bring them into that realm of healing, cultivating their own energy.
Hmm.
And this year I have a guy, I've been teaching him for 15 years.
Wow.
And like he comes every week. And the amount of things that have happened to him that he's recovered from so rapidly is unbelievable. He's 78 this year, this guy. And he just doesn't look it. I said, if he keeps going, uh, he's going to reverse aging. And he's just amazing. This is a guy that could not walk
Hmm.
maybe 5, 10 minutes walk, and then he'd be in severe pain. I mean, so dysfunctional. His pelvis, hips, the sacroiliac joint, the tailbone, just constant pain.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of it was mental, emotional from the loss of his daughter, but there was a lot of other stuff going on there from years of standing as a teacher
Hmm.
and a combination of physical work with him and the Neigong. And I'm going to say maybe only a couple of years into his training, we had a huge, it was like a protest here in Ireland, all nationally against a particular type of taxation that was coming in. And he walked 5 hours on these marches through the streets of Dublin, 5 hours. This is a guy that couldn't cross the road to get the newspaper, so, and he put it completely down to the training. Um,
Hmm.
so I've been still working with this guy and teaching him what I'm learning. So we're training together.
Hmm.
Um, and anything else, yeah. And obviously more recently going back to teaching online with Chi Life Academy. And I decided I would do the China Universe Qigong because it's the only system that I've like purely inherited, as in this is the system, learn it, go away and use it, rather than learning it from a third party.
Hmm.
And it's a very basic system, very beautiful. It's a form. Now extra things come with it, but it's purely designed for healing. It's 100% designed to heal the human body in whatever capacity is possible
Hmm.
because it's just harmonizing yin and yang. And it mimics, some of the movements mimic or supposedly mimic a crane flying
Hmm.
or standing on a lily pad. And then parts of the form mimic, I believe, has Buddhist, though it's based on Taoism, has a Buddhist influence in that the form is called the lotus flower opens. Um, and this Qigong, Neigong, whatever you want to call it, is probably about 1,000 years old. Um, so it was developed, if you like, to help people increase their capacity for enlightenment. So there's four aspects to it, which is treatment of the self, so primarily, sorry, rehabilitation of the self, then treatment, then growth of wisdom, knowledge, uh, and then lastly, harmonization of the whole system. So it's broken into four aspects. Now, the original form was 2.5 hours to do. And my teacher quickly realized that was not going to be possible in China, in busy China. He learned this form, I think, in the 70s. He'd already done about 20 years of training at that point, but he decided, he said to his teacher, look, China's getting faster and bigger and busier, and to get people to meet him at the park for 2.5 hours training every day just, wasn't going to cut it. But his teacher said, look, you'll figure it out, you'll work it out. And a few years later, with the help of a very famous Chinese scientist who worked for the equivalent of NASA, if you like, they did a lot of physical quantum mechanical tests on him, so hooking him up to machines,
Mhm.
whatever technology they had back then. And from the data, um, the guy who developed the system, Master Wang, he said, okay, these seems to be the four big themes. And if we work with these four themes, we could probably train the system in an hour, less than an hour, maybe 30 minutes. And that makes it then, it's a shortcut, if you like, because true yogi masters, they live isolated from people generally, from society generally, because they've decided to dedicate themselves to just one thing. Now, the society we live in is more about being in harmony with the people around us, integrating our knowledge with these people. And Master Wang used to say, the true master now is the one that can walk down the side street and still be in a state of harmony with all the traffic and the
Mhm.
busyness and the noisiness of life. And that really resonated with me. That really I thought, right, that's where I need to be. And so I had this idea of a healer in every household was a big idea of having at least one person in everybody's household that is a healer, but not necessarily healing people, but is healing themselves. And then the resonance of that is carried through the household. Um, that's currently where I am at. I have my own weaknesses, if you like, or, health issues that I still work with, but I don't claim to be a master of anything other than trying to master myself in whatever capacity. I was drawn to this because of injury, and a slow recovery from injury. And then it kind of was always with me. The beauty I find with Qigong Neigong is when you reach a certain level, a certain foundational level, it never regresses. Unlike, as you know, in and the stuff that you've learnt over the years, is that you can take a muscle and stress it, and it will grow and rebuild stronger. But it can get to a certain point in your life where you're never going to be able to build that muscle to the same size. It maybe can retain a certain element of strength. And what I found with this was the older I got, the better I got at it. So it was one of those rare things that age does not define your how good and how skillful you become with Neigong and Qigong. So the system automatically has longevity in it. And the things that I can do now from even 7, 8 years ago when we first saw each other, physically is different. You know,
Hmm.
maybe it doesn't look as physical or as impressive, you know, low stances and you know the thighs being stressed. But then the way that I generate power and energy in the body is more refined. And likewise with my teachers above me, who, you know, I always look at them and think, gosh, I'd love to be at that level, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so for me, that was the key thing with this was longevity and being able to do this in my 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Like this student of mine who's 78, and it's like, well, this guy's going to be have no problem doing pretty much the same stuff as I'm doing in his 80s
Hmm.
and quite easily. So that's what really drew me to it, and also helped me recover from very bad burnout. I was quite a workaholic. I was obsessed with putting the hours in, you know,
Hmm.
and burning the candle at both ends, we call it. And I knew that herbal medicine, diet, sleep were going to help, but I needed something that was could switch on that mind-body connection,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
instead of trying to will myself back into good health, which has its place. I needed something that I could embody myself and that my body would listen to and then my mind would listen to. So use my body as a computer, as a keyboard to program back into the mind to say, hey, look, this is the work I'm doing for myself. I'm self-nourishing. Will you listen? Will you follow that input? Will you return back to me the feedback, if you like, from me putting in the time and effort to be with just with myself? And that dragged me out of a dark hole. I mean, my wife can testify to seeing me, you know, not being able to really do anything, you know, lying in bed all day long and just struggling. I mean, I knew that I would recover because I was eating. It wasn't like I was starving myself. My body still felt like it needed fuel. So I knew it wasn't like a severe illness, but it was like a nervous system was shredded. And it took a good 2 or 3 years to recover, but with the help of the China universe as a system and the consistency with the training, I was able to come back from that burnout phase. And yeah, so that's a lot to cover. Um, and I'm blessed to know people from all around the world that I can talk to and train with and share these gifts, these things that I have learned. Um, and I have in the past, John, you know, I've you know, always I don't know if you've experienced this yourself, but I've been like been chasing maybe I, you know, wanted to be able to have a certain skill set, you know, and wanted to be like the Jedi Knight, you know, be able to like, you know, move things with my mind and you know, there are people that chase that and they work with it, but it's they don't always grasp it because they're chasing it. And the beauty of Qigong and Neigong is that if that is part of what is the pathway for you, it will arise.
Yeah.
And Master Wang used to say, he used to have this saying EHF, which meant exceptional human feats. And most of us don't know what our exceptional human feat is, what we're able to do that is exceptional, a gift or a skill set. And the Qigong and the Neigong can draw that out of you. But you don't go chasing maybe the ability to set fire to paper with your hands without touching it. Don't go chasing trying to, you know, I don't know, bend metal with your mind. Don't go chasing that. Just stay within your training.
Hmm.
And if it's there for you, it's there for you. And yeah, I've had moments, you know, I've had moments where I've accidentally shot, you know, someone like transmitted maybe an electrical charge during training and you can it's palpable, you know, they feel it and it's like I'm like, oh, I want to get that back. How did I do that? You know, and then it eludes you because you're trying to chase it.
Mm.
So for me though, it's the gift that it gives me. It's strengthened my spiritual beliefs. It's strengthened an innate natural psychic ability that I've inherited. Um, so it's strengthened all of those abilities. but it's not, I didn't chase that. It was a side effect, if you like, of the training. Um, and also, I think, for people who want to do something that is perhaps uh, it suits their body type, maybe it suits their capacity to move and stand and turn and shake, and there's an effort needed in the qigong. It's like at a very high level of training, it can be very stressful on the body, but it depends very much on what you're trying to achieve. Um, and you know this, right? You've witnessed this where you're very fit, you're very strong, you're a very human being, but you can take somebody like yourself and put them into certain positions, stances, and movements, and they can immediately feel the effect. Now, say, picking up a 30 kg kettlebell and swinging it around, it's a different effect,
Hmm.
a tangible effect. I mean, being fit and strong like yourself does have a huge advantage, but your nervous system has to relearn things that maybe don't sit within that realm. And so people who are naturally strong and fit will have an advantage, but they'll also have to be able to let go of that advantage, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Whereas my fitness and my strength, I probably had more when I was younger. But when I look back at myself as a youth, it was all based around fear and the need to fight, the need to like push back against people, the need to have some secure ground against my environment. Um, and then having this, having this training, there's a sense of peace and a sense of quiet confidence that I thought that I would get from martial arts, but actually I didn't. It was more, for me, it was more external turmoil. I mean, I walked with great confidence into a bar or a club, or if I was going anywhere with my friends, they always wanted me to be in the group, walk through the park together. And my nickname was Monty, so they say put Monty at the front. He'll sort. If there's any trouble, he'll sort it out. I used to think in my mind, crikey, I don't think I'm that tough. I'm really not that tough. But obviously, I was exuding that martial sort of presence. Whereas the people I'm trained with now, they're the most unassuming, quiet, peaceful people. But my gosh, woe betide anyone who, inadvertently lays a hand on them. Um, yeah, so that's a lot to unpack there. I've ranted there for half an hour. Sorry.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great. I've got some notes I want to refer back to too. Just kind of jumping in, I was just thinking about your last point on how being physically fit can help, but it's not necessarily helpful. And, you know, I definitely had this experience. And it's funny because I referenced this first because we just had a team retreat here a few weeks ago, and I was teaching some Qigong to my team. And Anthony, one of my assistant coaches, is built just like me. He's a horse. His quads are bigger than mine, as much as I don't like to admit that. He is, he's a tank. And it's so funny because he's going through and he's 31. I think he's 31 now, and I'm 35. And so I can see the journey that he's on because I've been on it. And he's on the journey of softening, and he's becoming more in tune with his body and his energy body because of the ceilings and the limitations that he's hitting and the injuries that he's continuing to notice and experience in his physical body. Like you said,
Mm,
there's a certain point, and we can break it down like, yeah, ligaments and tendons don't keep up with the muscles. And if you train the joint capsules and, you do your functional range conditioning, you can but there's something else. There's something else there. And I really do think age is a factor there where, and like a lot of teachers talk about this, how, a lot of people, I think even Napoleon Hill said that most don't get in contact with their spiritual energy until their 40s, a lot until their 50s. And,
Mm,
I was blessed to, be spontaneously thrown into a relationship with that part of myself in my mid 20s. So I've been practicing early, but man, was the only reason that happened is because I went so far the other way that it was
mm,
a necessity for me to have that conversation sooner than most. And so I laugh at where Anthony is in his journey at certain points, and I can see his frustration, like, shut up, stop laughing. I'm like, I'm just laughing at myself, bro. Because like one thing that to bring it back around to the team retreat is we're just doing Muji and
mm,
just getting him to relax his shoulders and
mm,
he's holding with the muscles and I just fucking can remember you right in front of me like relax your shoulders. I'm like I am relaxing my shoulders. You're like no, relax your shoulders. And like just giving him some of the cues you gave me of like resting the elbows on a table and then remembering me practicing. And I remember the day I was on the dock. I was on a dock practicing in Washington at the time before I even moved to Maui. And I just remember like, I think I'm getting it. It's feeling different. And I had a similar experience
mm.
with yoga in a different context, but just like when you start doing these internal practices, things start changing if you stay consistent and intentional and, you put in that effort. And yeah, it is definitely something else that you can start tapping into. And it's this internal capacity. And, that's one of the reasons why I loved Gong and still love Gong. And Mike, actually, one of my other coaches, he's the virtual community manager. He loves Gong. He loves the 8 step. And
Mm.
it's something that he like constantly reaffirms. He's like, I have to do that shit every morning. It just
Yeah,
is what taps me in and tunes me into my internal system. And I love how you said, I think it was the Wuji Chuang is
yeah,
creating some sacred geometrical shapes because that's exactly what I think of when I'm doing the Neigong is like, and it's very internal to external to internal to external. There's like,
yeah,
you're definitely hitting these different shapes that are changing the way information, energy is moving and being processed through the system. And I love the concept already of Wu Ji. Like, me, that shit is my jam. And so
yeah,
just hearing about that, I'm like, ooh, that sounds like something that I would love to chew on too. So
yeah,
can't wait to
yeah.
have
Sure.
that come
Well, I
through
mean,
you.
I'm now studying this Ouija Chuan, so I'm the student of it, and obviously there are people that I've met that are way more competent than myself. But I love the I always love being a student. There's something so blessed about it because it allows you to completely remove your ego, and experience being right down the bottom of that ladder again. And then it's nice to know you've got some direction in which to work towards. Um, I had this amazing experience with a student of this guy that's teaching me the stuff, and I think she's been training with him for many, many years. I don't quote me, but I think something like 16 years or something. And she was showing me a particular posture, and she wasn't. What I liked about her was she was straight. And she like that German sort of directness.
Yep, yep, yep.
And she wasn't happy with the stance, and so she demonstrated to me why that stance was unhappy. She was unhappy with it. She proceeded to fling me about 20 feet backwards. And she's a tiny little lady. She's smaller than Tiara. And but she did it in a way that was like, if it's wrong, this is what's going to happen. Fling. I was like, oh, okay. So, and then towards the end, she started to get happier with me. She was like, oh yeah, no, it's looking a bit better. You're kind of getting it. And but then at the end, she asked me like, she didn't know anything about me and who I was and what did I do. And I said, oh, trained in Qigong for healing capacity, and oh, could you show me something? So I started doing a particular form, inner alchemy form, and she immediately stepped back and was like sort of vibing, like her body was like, and she was obviously so sensitive. I mean, you know this, some people train with you and they're very stoic and they don't move and they can hold Wuji and they're just like solid. And I know people are very energy sensitive, and you could see that she was energy. And she started jumping around the place and crying and laughing. And she was like, "Oh, that's amazing." And I thought to myself, huh, interesting. It's like I'm less sensitive to the postures and the movements of this system, and I've not fully integrated yet with it. But then she's more sensitive to then when I go into my thing. And so it's like there's all these different layers and levels. There isn't one thing better or greater than the other. But what I do remember is one of my students, and he won't mind me saying this, Frederico, if you're watching, he was a boxer and a rugby player. And he still is a in his 50s, an extremely fit person. He played at a very high level, and he could not do the turning. The way we do some harmonization of the body, letting go, shaking and turning is a very basic form, but it's fundamental to just get embodied, to shake up the fluid, to move the lymph. Um, but he could not turn for years and years and years. It was like he was like this, turning, because the boxing, for some reason, and
Oh,
his
yeah.
training, he was
Yeah.
very relaxed when he was boxing, but his muscles were held in this tense way. And then one day he got it. I just remember him just constantly adjust, correct. And I thought, I'm not going to show him. I'm just going to talk to him and get that embodiment going. To build that awareness. Where are your shoulders now? Where are your elbows now? Are you happy with the way you're standing? Can you feel your pelvis turning? Is your spine, so getting him to self-actualize. And it was now it's like no problem. He can just, so it's not even so much that there's tension, it's more like a learnt behavior.
Hmm.
And somebody I met once said, you have to become the Qigong animal. So your body has to become this animal of Qigong, this creature, this evolved being. And it's a lot easier to plug Qigong and Neigong into your kettlebells, right? I'm sure if we took a set of kettlebells and we got into that Neigong that relaxed, the power generation is different, muscle set movement's different. You probably feel it more at a fascial level, like all this popularity around fascia lately it's not new. It's relearned, it's rehashed and relearned technology that I think we had more access to. But for your colleague, teaching him the Wuji is a phenomenal thing. It's a life-changing thing. As soon as those shoulders come down, and then he realizes, oh, I can rest within my structure. There's a realization, and there's an understanding. Then some of these Shaolin monks with very impressive postures they can hold for long, long, long periods of time. They can do it because they're not using a muscular system. They're using the structure, the framework of the skeletal system, but they're supporting themselves through their connective tissue.
Hmm.
They're activating through their mind. I mean, the Chinese way of training generally, I'm not saying in all cases because obviously I experienced different cases, but generally is they show you, and then you have to spend the next 60 years figuring out what that means. And I've been fortunate to train with masters who lived outside of China, or trained with masters that lived outside of China in some cases. And there's a lot more dialogue and communication. There's a lot more, well, teacher, that is that right? No, no, just adjust the foot slightly, get that finger more in alignment with the thumb, and then you're like, oh, now I can feel the energy moving in a different way. And it's because they're at a stage now, a lot of these guys, where they know it's going to be lost if they don't break down the walls, open up, fast track you.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you this now, there's so many of my colleagues have spent years in standing postures and still cannot feel chi, can still not feel energy, can still not feel the dantian. And it's sad, it's a sad side effect of this uh, watch me, follow me style of training. Um, we see it in the martial arts, I'm sure, like maybe not so much in the grappling styles, but in certainly in the karate styles, it's like you block like this, you punch like this, follow me. But they have no internal dynamics. They cannot generate the same level of power as the more senior because they're not showing it. So for me, the frustration of being burnt out, the frustration of wondering why, when I was working with clients, I felt so ill afterwards. That didn't make sense. And I knew that I needed to change the way I exist within this reality or change the way my body perceives this reality to offset a lot of um, those health issues I was having. And,
Yeah.
you know, for somebody who's quite muscular and strong. They've determined their physicality through that. And when you remove that need to be strong and you can embody strength through being soft, it's quite a revelation. It's like the brain goes, huh? Oh, we can do this? Yes, we can. Um, Babies do it all the time. I mean, you know this, one of your trainers, I believe, watching a podcast of him years ago, talked about try and move like a baby for 10 minutes. And you get people on the floor and they follow a film of a baby lying down, rolling, sticking the legs up, touching the toes, turning over, doing a back arch, going onto the side, sticking the big toe in the mouth. After 10 minutes, these athletes were absolutely exhausted. I can't keep up with this baby's fitter than me yet because the baby's not using a muscular system. The baby's embodying its natural elasticity. And in fact, by moving like that constant, then it's building up a framework in which the baby can then stand
Mhm.
or hold itself upright. So the baby's innately training itself to then work with gravity. And so the idea with Qigong and Neigong is that we're aware of the gravitational forces on our body and what they can do and what they can't do. But if I got you to pick up a mango, right, or in this case a charger, if I pick it up, it's still subject to gravitational pull. But when it's with me, it's not, right? It's not subject to anything because we're now one system. We're now together as one thing. And that's the beauty with Neigong and Qigong is you're creating your body as one unit. And therefore, when it's one unit, it's not subject to the same forces as a person who's only very much moving in a linear fashion,
Mhm.
forward, backwards, sideways, left. We're now moving as one system, as a whole, as a fluid dynamic. And so it makes sense why there's an aging reversal because dynamically all the cells are communicating, and the body is being used like a hydraulic device. It's one system pressurizing, depressurizing, pressurizing, depressurizing. Hence why a lot of these movements that we do have this strange kind of jellyfish movement. We are activating that connective tissue by moving this way. So a lot of this is a signal to tell the rest of the body, this is what I need you to do. And it's taken me a long time to reverse engineer that through watching, following, and asking questions and experimenting. And does that work for me? Does it not work for me? But the health benefits for some people are extremely powerfully spiritually grounding them, centering them, focusing their mind. For others, like miraculously healing quickly from a regular sports injury. For other people, it's recovery from illness. Um, and I love to see those transformations that you talked about with your colleagues, with your students, with your fellow brothers, because there's a realization, oh, I can actually hold this posture for a long time without stress, without nervous system stress. Um, and it's that letting go. It's an embodiment of what we're here to do. You can physically let go, then you can start to mentally let go, and then you can spiritually allow everything to flow, energetically allow everything to flow. And I think when we see these young monks in China being tortured in these low stances, a lot of it was preparation for later on, for this kind of spiritual idea. But more recently, I was watching an interview with a Shaolin monk who trained to a really, really high level and traveled the world demonstrating, but completely destroyed his legs, like from the so many low stances and kicks, and after a while, he couldn't be in the troop. He couldn't be in this demonstration troop anymore. And so he went back and he said, like, what is the within my discipline that can help me heal? And he found uh, a particular system of training. And he said, even still, it took many, many years to recover from the damage that had been done. But he recovered through consistency, through diligence, through constant correct signal going into the body, right? And you've studied this, right? In environment has a larger signal to how the body responds. It can affect how the body adapts, right? So when you're doing your yoga and you're doing your strength training or your functional movements or mobilizations, breath work, these are all big signals that you can send to the small, big signals to send to the smaller parts of the body. So in a way, Qigong, Neigong, Daoyin, all these things, they're just another pathway. It's just another pathway, but their emphasis is very much on holism,
Hmm.
um, respecting that you're strong, fit, healthy, you eat well, you're in a beautiful environment where you live. 99% of everything is in your favor, but sometimes by doing the qigong, you get that extra 1% that is enough to tip the balance in your favor. And 1% in over a lifetime is a lot. Like if you think you set a compass and you're 1 degree off, it's not really too much of a problem until you've gone 300 miles. And then suddenly you're way off course.
Hmm.
So that qigong is to me is like the compass needle. It just brings you back to the center. Oh, you're slightly off to the no, come back to the center. Oh,
Hmm.
you've gone up this way, come back to your center.
Hmm.
And I think as much as we can maintain that center, we feel grounded, rooted, centered, and then we're respecting the system as a whole, then that naturally has to have a health benefit for you,
Hmm.
at whatever capacity.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
there are
integration.
ladies that I taught that are like they work in a bakery, and they stand all day kneading bread, and some of them are way better qigong neigong practitioners than some of the top athletes,
Hmm.
you know. And it can be interesting, and it can also be frustrating for those people who have learned to be very high level at what they do, and then suddenly now they have to relearn how to use their body.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's another rant.
And it just takes time too, like I
Yeah.
can relate to that of like, and referring back to Anthony, I can see where he's at because I remember that frustration. And it's a different way. And not only is
Yeah.
it a different way, but it just requires time. It's a new set of skills. And like you said too, which I love, was the nuances of all of the paths are within themselves infinite portals of depth to mastery. But I think really, especially Age of Aquarius, where we are, integration and embodiment as a collective species, and what you said too about how it's time to share these teachings before they're lost. I agree on that. And on the other note, consciousness is ready. The soil is so fertile. Like I'm thinking of the exact same session where I had Anthony, like, I'm like, oh,
Mm,
there I am, that old way. That's the old way. It's a perfect example of the force,
mm,
physical force, the hyper masculine that way. And then I had Gabby, our photographer, who's born and raised in Costa Rica and is just like tuned in, tapped in, turned on, just automatic. And
mm,
I mean, she's just an open, clearly open channel, very connected to her feminine energy, just an open channel, like very soft, very like Qigong naturally. She's doing Qigong naturally all the time
mm.
just by
Yeah.
being in that state of Wu Ji more than trying to force. And she'd never done Qigong before. And I just put her in Zhang Zong, just getting her in base position and like, okay, yeah, tuck your pelvis a little bit to create a little link there. Okay, now tuck your chin a little bit and now, lengthen the string just a little bit. And then, okay, now sink your body, sink, sink, sink. And she's just like, 2, 3
Mm,
minutes in, and she's like, you can see she's having an experience, an energetic
mm,
experience, Kundalini, whatever you want to call it, of like, okay, the circuits have been opened. And because she's already so open and the channel is clean and clear and ready, it's just like, oh, let's plug this in here, beep, beep, boop, boop. That's it, like 3 minutes. And she's just, and I think that is going to be more and more the case, especially with the younger generation coming in,
Sure.
where their circuitry is different. And just
Absolutely.
having a little bit of that framework to like, okay, there you go, you're good,
Mm,
and just like the energy starts flowing and like something too that I definitely have experienced and I see more and more that you spoke to and that I can speak to as well. And I see a lot in my clientele, especially in that middle-aged man that's hitting burnout, that's yanged. They've yanged, and they burnt the candle up. And I noticed
mm,
this especially in myself, is like you can't get yang from yang, you can only get yang from yin. And
mhm,
the yang practices will only work until a certain point in your life, and then at a point you have to start cultivating yin if you want to keep expressing yang at that high capacity. And without
mm,
pranayama, without qigong, without meditation, without nature, that's another thing I love about these practices is a lot of the times they just help to elicit the opportunity to get off technology and get away from blue light and artificial light and non-native EMFs and 5G and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and on, that's
mm,
disrupting that natural flow of energy within us that is there,
mm,
whatever little bit is there that's flowing, that's been, buried and calcified, is just getting hammered on by technology. And then you add work, and then you go lift weights in a blue lit gym with polyester and spandex and Bluetooth headphones, and you just
mm,
exacerbate. And then it's like you see this old dude in the park doing Qigong barefoot, and he's 80 and he's stronger and more flexible than you. And you're like, okay, there's something
mm,
here. And that's something that I've really noticed is when I'm not doing my yin practices and when I'm not getting my skin on the earth and especially skin in the sun and charging that internal battery and cultivating yin, I
mm.
notice like I'm so sensitive myself now after, 12, 13 years of practice. And even just like you said, dude, 1% when you're that sensitive, you notice it's a pretty notable difference. Like just eating food too late or eating too much food, you don't sleep as
Yeah.
well. And I'll still wake up and do all my things, but I'm aware there's a difference in my internal flow of energy. Like it's a little bit more difficult to get up. My body's just a little bit stiffer and a little bit tighter. And like if you're looking at like any kind of high level performance, like you said, 1% cultivated over 10 years, 1% for 100 days is 100% change. You multiply that by, 365, you're looking at 3x in 1 year, 10 years, 30x,
Mm,
arbitrary what that number is, but it's a significant difference. And the more sensitive you are, the more tuned you are. Like homegirl, that's just like tuned in, and Gabby, my photographer, like, dude, 2, 3 minutes of a practice or 2, 3 minutes of doing something that blocks or disrupts that flow of energy, like it's notable. And in this game at this level, even me only being 35, but I'm entering that phase of my life where it's like I have to reorient and restructure the way and reprioritize the way I live and the way I train. Like now I'm
Mm,
doing, other than like late night calls like this for the podcast, like I'm working outside 90% of the time. I'm not wearing contacts anymore so I can get light in my eyes. I'm going shirtless and barefoot as often as possible. Like I'm prioritizing cultivating yin because I know I'm going to be burning up yang all day long. I'm going to be working, I'm going to be training, I'm going to be doing
mm,
a lot of externally focused activity. And if I don't charge my yin battery, man, how I notice it now. And looking at the work that we do, like my three pillars, performance, longevity, and well-being, these practices are that 1% to those three buckets that are so necessary, and they are all different. I absolutely do agree. Like even
mm,
just the little that I know that you've taught me and I've practiced over the last several years is a notable difference in the different forms and the different movements and how those now show up in my yoga. The way that I move when I'm doing different yoga postures, even like a warrior pose, for example, like even just the hand movements. And there's just a notable difference, like you said. And it's like that pulsation that we see in cells, in atoms, the way atoms vibrate, the way the cosmos itself breathes. And it's like, okay, micro to macro, the Tao, all of this, it's like we are that. You're starting to see all these principles play out, and it's not a knowledge necessarily. It's not something that you learn from reading about per se.
mm,
It's literally the teachings express within you through this direct experience from practicing these movements, whether
mm,
it's Qigong, Neigong, China Universe, Wu Ji Chuang. They're all like reading a different book that,
mm,
all have similar themes, but different characters and different plot lines. And it just helps you have a better understanding of the whole story, the whole picture. And it goes back to those axioms, those, paradoxical, hilarious, annoying, but like so true axioms of like know thyself and like
mm,
you are the universe inside out and all that kind of shit. And it's like, man, you start
mm,
doing these practices long enough, you start spending enough time out in nature doing this stuff, and it's just like it's in you. You know it to be true, and you can speak to it and articulate it in a way that I love, especially like, and you're a great example of that. And I'm a student in this process as well, is like we don't have to read books on this stuff to be able to talk about it because it is something that is literally inside our DNA, inside our cellular structure, inside our soul blueprint that becomes activated, becomes epigenetically expressed, becomes alive in you, literally alive
mm,
through this stuff, through this practice, through this movement. And it's
mm.
fascinating to see how that journey, especially for a man, I guess, or at least for both of us, as that direct experience of like masculine, yang, hard, just beat it to death and you'll get there, and it's like you're just beating yourself to death, and then
Yeah,
like coming back into this softening and like, oh, now, and the extreme human feats,
yeah.
like how I love too that concept of like even if you're not able to burn fire, like what an extreme human feat compassion is, patience is, relatability, patience and like that kind of stuff that's just like,
Or imagine
whoa,
if if you're an authentic human, like you're
yeah.
naturally authentic, and then you're training, that authenticism is 10, as you would say, 10x. And then this makes sense that, when people are in the present of enlightened people, maybe that person already had enlightenment, but because of their training, the spiritual training or the physical training, stretching, moving the body, eating well, being in sunlight. It's like for you when we were on the beach in Tofino and those young guys, they naturally gravitated to you. You were only like a few years older than them, maybe 10 years older than them, but still in that capacity to communicate with them.
Hmm.
And they completely opened up to you because you were like, I have been there. I
Hmm.
have been where you have been. You know, this is where I am now, and you can get there too. And they were like, "Oh my God, can I?" And you're
Yep.
like, "Yeah, man, I was doing way more bad stuff than you were at your age, you know." And it's good for them to see, oh, that transformation is possible.
Yeah.
You know, they say like a leopard doesn't change its spots, but I think if you change the environment in which that leopard was in, right, it suddenly can lose its spots or become dark and become what we call a panther.
Hmm.
You know, or a puma or whatever.
Hmm.
Over time it can adapt to its environment. And the quickest way to change your environment is to change, as you know, the way you move, the
Mm.
way you talk, the way you
Hmm.
interact, the way you consume things, the way you express things.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, some vessels are like yours. They're built for power, strength, movement, flexibility. Like that's the vessel you have been blessed with. My vessel it has been battered. I mean, I'm covered in scar tissue, lumps and bumps. Um, and you know, my fingers don't work kind of strange. There's all kinds of weird alien stuff going on with me, but it I made it work in a certain capacity for a certain length of time until it didn't. And then I
Hmm.
had to change the input. I had to change the input so that then it would and I had to kind of relearn myself.
Hmm.
To relearn that standing like this and being like, come on, I fucking have you, you know,
Yep.
that
Yep.
had to go. It didn't serve, it wasn't serving me. It wasn't very grounded, it wasn't very centered.
Yep.
You know, burning the yang. I like to burn my yang quite a lot. Chasing women everywhere, burning up my yang energy, you know. And yeah, look, the thing is, you know, and I know you can live with a low. It's a little bit like an engine. You can drive the car with a little bit of fuel in the bottom. You'll go a certain distance, and then no fuel, you can't go, right? But you can refill that car again, and you can go again. But if you have no yang energy, the car will never go. Doesn't matter if you've 6 tanks of petrol or diesel. That engine is not going to do anything because it can't mobilize itself. So yang energy is important for life. It's what mobilizes the heart, right? And so you're gonna die without yang energy. You need the sun. That's why you go out into the sun. It's the quickest way. It is the fastest way of getting yang energy into the body,
Yep.
more so than food, you know. That boiling flame, like here's a funny one. Somebody said to me the other day, you know, oh, do you believe in God? You know, do you believe in this? Or do you believe in worshiping the sun and the moon? And I said, well, what is more real? You know, we know the sun is there, we know it exists. We know the moon is there, we know it exists within this current construct, I mean. Um, have I seen God? No. Do I know what God looks like? No. But I think for me, the word God is an omnipresent state. It's a state that exists within us, outside of us. It's that force, you know, like the Jedi, the force that binds everything.
Mhm.
But I know that I can worship the sun, and we do, right? We here in Ireland. Oh, I mean, here now you're late at night. I know it's late there, but now the sun is coming through you know, and it's coming through, and it's warming the land. It's adding in extra yang. It makes sense for us to. I think this year is the first year in a long time we've had really good weather in Ireland, and my body is naturally tanning. It's just naturally slowly getting darker just from just from training outside without any real capacity to want to strip off and get the sun. It's just naturally responding to that warmth, that caring, that nourishing energy. Um, and you know, we have to remember that a lot of these things that me and you are doing, that we're training in, existed long before Taoism or Buddhism. And anything that's an ism is a creation of a human
Mhm.
behavior.
Mhm.
Before that, you know, if you needed to call on your friends, you'd stand. out in nature and chant. You know, the Aboriginals have the woomera stick and the whoop, whoop. They make sound, vibration to call their friends in, to send signals. Natives would light fires, use yang energy to communicate, send signals up to heaven. Um, it's all just there. And you're right, because there's a saying here in Ireland by it was a famous rugby player said, that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. And
Mm.
that's what we're working with is there's a huge difference between knowledge and wisdom. And I do think this practice brings about more wisdom, more innate wisdom.
Yep.
We still have the books and the scriptures
Yep.
and the sacred geometry that's all around us if you just open your eyes and look. I mean, look at where you are. I mean, if you go and find standing stones where you are, there's going to be sacred geometry, The stone circle we were at with my son, somebody had carved. I mean, this is something that I think the circle is, it's very old. I'm gonna say it's more than 3,000 years old. And somebody carved a phallus and on one stone, and then the other carved the vulva. So they
Mm.
knew that where the sun was coming up, that's like the yang male energy, and where the moon was coming as the female yin receptive energy.
Mm.
So yin and yang has been with us as long as we could see the moon and the sun, the
Mm.
stars and the ocean, the volcanoes and the water, um, the rock and the river. Yin and yang has been with us as part of our nature. And as we transition into, as you say, into Aquarius, it's Aquarius is the water carrier, right? Even though it's an air sign, she is carrying the knowledge on her shoulders and she's pouring it gently towards us. All the
Mm.
knowledge you could ever want is being given to you, but the wisdom is knowing how to use that knowledge appropriately.